Welcome back, guys. In this video, we're going to be going over requirement 3. So let's get started. Okay, so what is requirement 3 about? First, we need to define what the term intellectual property means. We then need to describe the types of intellectual property associated with the game design industry. Basically, what some examples are of intellectual property. Next, we need to describe how intellectual property is protected and why protection is necessary. Finally, we need to define and give an example of a licensed property. Hey, and disclaimer time. Yeah, disclaimers. First, we will be using a mix of content from the Game Design Merit Badge book and content from outside the Merit Badge book. Second, we will be using the Game Design Merit Badge workbook to guide us through meeting this requirement. Third, the content of this video is a compilation of my knowledge and experience gained from the college course content involved with my degree. Classes taken at the community college level involving the game industry, and my personal experiences and knowledge of the inner workings of games gathered since 1999, around when I was really getting into gaming. I will be using some references cited from other sources for formal definitions. Fourth, the content in this video is probably going to lean a little heavier on video games. Lastly, the hypothetical Scout Justin in the Merit Badge book is not me. You can find the beginning of the intellectual property section of the Merit Badge book on page 62. Alright, what are we going to cover in this video? We'll be going over what intellectual property is, what kinds of things are considered intellectual property in the game industry, ways intellectual property is protected by law, why we need to have intellectual property protected, and what licensed property is. Let's start off with defining intellectual property, or IP. I did a basic Google search to find a definition, and it came up with a work or invention that is the result of creativity, such as a manuscript or a design, to which one has rights and for which one may apply for a patent, copyright, trademark, etc. I also found the World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, definition on their website. It says intellectual property refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs, and symbols, names, and images used in commerce. The URL on the screen is where I found this definition, and the link will be in the video description. Now let's go over some types of intellectual property. First, there's software. This is most commonly identified with video games. Some examples of software are things like the source code, certain scripts, textures, audio, like voiceovers or soundtracks, and models, like the characters, structures, and landscapes. Next, we have instruction manuals, which are things like the list of rules, explanations of game elements, and so on. There's also new technologies. This is usually something involving hardware, like virtual reality headsets, game controllers, and game consoles. It can also cover software, with things like artificial intelligence or encryption algorithms. Alright, we also have logos, game pieces, and game boards. I kind of lumped these three together for these two examples. Monopoly, owned by Hasbro, has an iconic logo, and I'll call him a mascot. You know, the guy with the top hat and the white mustache. They also have unique game pieces and game board layout. Another example is Hungry Hungry Hippos, also owned by Hasbro. In this case, their game board is a unique setup not found in use by any other game, to my knowledge. We also have things like what I'm calling unique mechanics not revealed, or trade secrets. For this, the Merit Badge book gives us a good non-game example of the Coca-Cola formula. Next, we have game names. This is both the name of the game and the characters in the game. For example, the game name Halo and its iconic character Master Chief. There's also game lore. To go over this one, we should define what lore is. Lore is the body of knowledge, especially of a traditional, anecdotal, or popular nature on a particular subject. I found this definition at the URL on the screen, and a link will be in the video description. Basically, lore is the universe that is behind the game. For example, we have the Star Wars universe. The lore of this game covers topics like the Jedi and Sith, what alien species there are, hyperspace travel, planet types and names, and so on. There's obviously other types of intellectual property, but I think this gives us a good basis for this requirement. Alright, what types of protection are out there? First, we have copyrights, which are those little C circle symbols you can find at the bottom of some websites. A copyright is enforceable decades after the creator has died. I can't tell you where I learned this one, but think about it. Copyrights are often seen being held by companies and organizations, so even though the content creator may be long gone, the company that holds the rights maintains their copyright claims. The Merit Badge book gives us a basic line on page 63 saying, "Copyright law protects creative, literary, and artistic works." Copyrights can also stop others from making games based on your game. If you notice the star here, good job. We're going to come back to this statement in licensed property. Next, we have patents. This content is taken from the Merit Badge book on page 63. Patents are issued by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office after a detailed and often costly application submission and review process that can take years to complete. Patents are good for up to 20 years, provided that you pay the required maintenance fees to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Patent law protects useful inventions that are novel and not obvious to people in the field. A few non-game examples the book lists of things that had or have patents are things like the airplane, the telephone, and the laser. Okay, next we have trade secrets. This is found in the Merit Badge book on page 63. These are items of information or technology that provide the owner with a competitive advantage in the marketplace and are kept secret by reasonable measures. Remember our example from the types of intellectual property? The Coca-Cola formula is considered a trade secret. Next, the book talks about trademarks and service marks, found on page 64. Trademarks and service marks protect words, names, symbols, sounds, or color that distinguish goods and services of a business from those of others. As for an example, well, let's look at the next item to explain this. There's another form of trademarks called registered trademarks. Let's start with some examples of registered trademarks in the game industry. We have company names like Hasbro and Activision, and the console name PlayStation. The Merit Badge book gives us, if you want to use the registered symbol, you must register your creation with and pay a fee to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which verifies that your use wouldn't be confused with any other use of that same design. Basically, having a registered trademark gives you more legal power than a trademark, otherwise known as an unregistered or common law trademark. This is why it was so difficult to find an example using the little TM symbol instead of the circle R symbol. Most companies want to eliminate the possibility that their product can be confused with another company's products by the consumer through similarities. So you're going to find a lot of examples of the circle R symbol and not so many or any that are using the little TM symbol. Okay, so why protect intellectual property? I'm going to give you two company names, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. No, they didn't start all this trademarking business, but what if Pepsi used the exact same recipe that Coke did? Without Coke's use of the trade secret protections, anyone could have access to the recipe Coke uses and start selling it as a competitor to Coke. As I mentioned, we also need to protect our IP to eliminate confusion with other products, companies, or brands. Let's say we have two companies. One company is called iGame, and they release a game called Shoot 'em Up. Well, another company comes along and calls themselves U-Game, and releases a game called Shoot 'Him Up. Pretty easy to confuse the two in conversation, huh? If iGame had a registered trademark on their name and the name of their game, then it would be unlikely the other company would be allowed to register as U-Game and register their game name Shoot 'Him Up, since it'd be too similar to iGame's already registered brand. We also want to be able to control who has rights to use our creations. You're probably familiar with how open source works, being that the code used to generate a piece of software is made available to the community at large to use and modify. Well, closed source is the opposite of that. Think of it like closed source being the Coca-Cola formula and open source being your carbonated kitchen concoction to try and make a cola-like soda drink. Now for licensed property. The Merit Badge book gives us a good example on page 64. A license is a contract between you and the rights owner that allows you to use the rights in a particular way in return for a licensing fee and other terms. An example of this is the Star Wars franchise, which was owned by Lucasfilm and then acquired by the Walt Disney Company in 2012. You can find information on Wikipedia at the URL on the screen and the link in the video description. Some things that have been licensed from Star Wars over the years are character names, ships like the Millennium Falcon, planets like Hoth, and there have been several games that have been set in the Star Wars universe, like BioWare's Star Wars: The Old Republic. Alright, well, thanks for watching, guys. Next up, we'll be going into what you need for requirement 4. See you in the next video.